In Venezuela, the candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, assured the revolutionary forces are the only ones that can guarantee peace and stability in the country. In Asia, the passage of Typhoon Gaemi caused severe damages in the Philippines, while Taiwan prepares for its arrival. And in the United States, Jewish activists gathered at Capitol Hill calling for an end to arms transfers to Israel ahead of Netanyahu's speech. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, the candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, assured that revolutionary forces are the only one capable of guaranteeing peace and stability in the country. Candidate Nicolás Maduro visited the people of Maracay in the state of Aragua, where he was received by the crowd awaiting his arrival, raising flags and banners as a token of their support before the presidential elections to be held on Sunday, July 28th. During this visit, the candidate of the Great Patriotic Poll assured that the map of Venezuela will be painted red because today, more than ever, the people will come out to defend their convictions and the project of the homeland. In this sense, the candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll assured that the extreme right only intends to privatize all the institutions and companies of the country, as well as to destroy Commander Chavez's great missions.
It is time to open the door to permanent peace. It is not time to improvise, new pretenders, new demagogies. It is not time to open the door to the monster of savage capitalism. To come and privatize everything to the people. Do you want a savage capitalist president to come and privatize education, privatize the right to education?
Capitalista, salvaje, y privatice la educación, privatice el derecho a la salud.
Privatize petroleum of Venezuela and give away the oil to the foreigners, privatize the right to housing, to eliminate and destroy the missions and great missions of Chavez.
Que eliminen y destruyan las misiones y grandes misiones.
Also, the candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll, Nicolás Maduro, assured that if the far right tries to generate chaos in the elections of July 28th, it will be the last time they will do it. During his visit to Valencia in the state of Carabobo, the candidate was received also by a crowd that was waiting for his arrival. The candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll qualified this great mobilization as the greatest mobilization in the history of the party, assuring that this was a sign of a great victory that will be achieved this coming July 28th. On the other hand, Nicolás Maduro stated that if the far right tries once again to undermine peace of the country by generating scenarios of violence in the presidential elections, this will be the last mistake they will make, affirming that he will be in charge of doing justice.
Porque Maracaibo hoy salió a la calle.
Because Maracaibo today took to the streets to tell the fascists, you in Venezuela will not pass. And I say it from Valencia and I say it from Maracaibo, if you eat the light on Sunday you will regret it for 200 years, if you make a mistake to harm the people it will be the last mistake the fascists will make.
Si cometen un error para hacerle daño al pueblo, será el último error que cometan los fascistas. Habrá justicia. Habrá dignidad.
There will be justice, there will be dignity. And I tell you, we are going to win very well, we have the strength, we have the power, we have the people, we have the 1 time 10 times 7.
Tenemos el pueblo, tenemos el 1 por 10 por 7.
In turn, the candidate for the Great Patriotic Poll recalled that in 1988, more than 5,000 people died after Carlos Andrés Pérez won the presidency in that year.
Y nosotros vivimos el 27 y 28 de febrero.
And we lived on February 27th and 28th, do you remember? Raise your hand, who remembers what was called the Caracazo and the Venezolanazo?
¿Y por qué fue el 27 de febrero?
And why was it February 27th? 5,000 dead, a bloodbath, they killed the people, why was it?
¿Por qué fue? 1988.
1988, Carlos Andrés Pérez appeared and they said El Gocho para el 88, and he came out with a government plan of lies, promises.
Y sacó un plan de gobierno de mentiras, promesas. Publicó y explicó su programa de gobierno.
He published and explained his government program lying to the people. Carlos Andrés Pérez, may he rest in peace, was one of the main leaders of the 12 apostles, so-called, of the surnames.
Llamados así, de los apellidos.
And the Venezuelan people will go out and vote on July 28th. They see the context in which they arrived to this election day.
In
a grand agreement, all the country political actors met to propose dates for the presidential elections at the end of February. 500 proposals were received, including 27 dates at 150 meetings. 90% of the political parties participated, and 152 organizations from the political, social, and economic life of the country signed it. These proposals were sent to the electoral authorities, who finally decided to hold elections on Sunday, 28 July. The countdown to a new electoral process began. We are deeply pleased that you, this legislative branch, are respectful of the Constitution, that you are respectful of the Constitution order, and that, once again, you go to the electoral branch before the National Electoral Council to bring a proposal that will begin to evaluate starting this week.
¿Qué esperamos nosotros con toda humildad, señor presidente?
What do we expect, in all humility, Mr. President, that you attend to and evaluate this document, which we have no hesitation in describing as historic, that you can review based on your prerogatives and your functions, what is contained in this document, and that you set the table so that the electoral party can be activated.
Pongan la mesa para que la fiesta electoral se active.
This meeting was considered crucial because it summarized several dialogue processes that unblocked paralyzed institutions such as the 2015 legislative branch, the renewal of the electoral branch, and the judiciary, isolating violent sectors in the process, increasingly diminishing position.
It's calm. I think we got used to it. We do our duty, and there is no longer that. Like years ago, many years ago, people used to see nervous purchases, that something is going to happen. No, that is something we have overcome.
The question of the elections that are coming, we are waiting for what can happen. But I think that here in the country, nothing is happening. And we are in Venezuela, and Venezuela is the best country in the world. And let's hope that our brothers who are outside the country come. And remember that when they asked for bad things for the country, we have to remind ourselves to the times of 2017, 2016, 2018, when they were burning people, when they were killing people for being black. Venezuela's electoral power is one of the 5 branches of the Venezuelan state. It is elected by the parliament after a wide-ranging debate. Was sworn in August 2023 before the full assembly. Its first task was to organize the plebiscito for the Esequibo on 3 December last. It is a political gesture, a message that there are different factors in Venezuelan society, in political factors that can come to an agreement, that they can agree on authorities, and from there, well, organize an electoral process as important as the presidential elections and future elections such as the regional, municipal, and parliamentary elections that have dates at least for the next 2 years in Venezuela. 38 political parties are participating in these presidential elections, supporting 10 presidential candidates, the largest number of candidates in the last 13 years.
teleSUR, Caracas, Venezuela.
The Teresa Carreño Theater in Caracas, Venezuela was a gathering place for thousands of cultural workers who expressed their loyal support to presidential candidate Nicolas Maduro. Our special envoy Brian Meir has a story.
Hundreds of folk music, theater, and circus performers and musicians gathered in the Teresa Carreño Cultural Complex in Caracas, Venezuela, to show their support for incumbent President Nicolas Maduro in this Sunday's presidential elections. One of the themes that was discussed between over a dozen musical and dance performances was what would happen to people who work in the cultural industry if the far right wins the elections.
Nobody will protect us, like in Argentina. I don't know how the culture workers would survive, because this has been the government that has protected our rights. No culture worker should go to the right.
After the 2000 coup against Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff, one of interim President Michel Temer's first acts was to destroy the Ministry of Culture. In Argentina, far-right President Javier Milei, who has close relations with the Venezuelan far-right opposition, has butchered spending on culture and is threatening to also eliminate the ministry completely. This has many in the Venezuelan arts community worried.
The fascist right, which calls itself libertarian now, is the negation of culture. If you don't believe me, read the news from Argentina, where a government, supposedly bearing the banner of freedom, has been dismantling all the culture-supporting policies that historically existed in Argentina.
For many Venezuelan cultural industry workers, re-electing President Nicolas Maduro seems like a matter of economic life or death. Brian Meir, teleSUR, Caracas.
Let's now take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Panama, sociologist Olmedo Beluche denounced in an interview that corporate sectors are pressuring the current government to reopen the copper mine, claiming that the national economy needs it.
Well, because the issue has not been settled, business sectors are pressuring the current government to reopen the mine, with or without the excuse of opening to close. That is one of the excuses that has been used. But lately the National Council of Private Enterprises and other unions have asked to speak directly because supposedly the national economy needs it. Then the business sectors are pressuring to reopen, and even with that they violate both the popular will expressed in the streets, as well as the decision of the Supreme Court of Justice, which pointed out that the contract violated the Constitution.
In the Philippines, the passage of Typhoon Gaemi caused severe flooding that affected the infrastructure on hundreds of thousands of people in the country. According to reports from the Philippine National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, on Monday, Gaemi went from tropical storm to typhoon with winds of up to 150 km per hour and gusts of 185 km per hour while moving towards the northwest territory of the archipelago. The agency also indicated that the typhoon affected close to 800,000 people, causing the death of 8 of them so far. The phenomenon has caused heavy rains and floods in several regions. In this context, the Chinese region of Taiwan is preparing for the arrival of Gaemi in the evening hours of this Wednesday. The Central Weather Agency ordered the suspension of classes and on-site work in 21 cities and counties, as well as the cancellation of more than 100 flights. The agency also issued a warning for extremely torrential rains in the mountainous regions. In Ethiopia, death toll rises to 229 after 2 landslides triggered by heavy rains. The Gulf Communications Service reported that 148 men and 81 women are confirmed dead so far. The death toll has risen sharply from the initial toll of 55 recorded on Monday night. According to the Gulf administrator, most of the victims were buried to death while trying to help the inhabitants of a house as rescue teams searched the ground for survivors of another landslide the previous day. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported that violence that plagues the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has suffered an upsurge in spite of the humanitarian truce in force until August 3rd. The agency denounced that the constant attacks against civilians in Lubero in the province of North Kivu violate one of the points of the agreement of the cessation of hostilities, thus hindering the entry of humanitarian aid into the territory. According to the agency reports, between March and early July, the escalating violence in the province has displaced some 390,000 people who are currently facing grave shelter, food and sanitation needs. We have a functional break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly, share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Functional break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Palestine, at least 11 people were killed by the Israeli army in assaults on the occupied West Bank during the last 24 hours. In this sense, on Wednesday, a 16-year-old teenager was killed after being shot during clashes with Israeli soldiers in Kalandia refugee camp, north of Jerusalem. On the other hand, a large contingent of vehicles of the occupation army also stormed family residences as part of their policy of collective punishment of the Palestinian population. Meanwhile, 6 people were reported wounded by bullets and 2 by beatings by Israeli soldiers, while the rest of the deaths occurred during assaults in the localities of Tubas and Tulkarem. In Palestine, the genocidal Israeli army bombed several eastern areas of Han Yunis, killing at least 71 people and injuring 200 in the Gaza Strip. Medical authorities stated that in the face of the violent aggression, thousands of Gazans were forced to move in very bad humanitarian and sanitary conditions. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society announced that 2 of its clinics in the east of Han Yunis were withdrawn by order of the Zionist occupation. The eastern areas of Han Yunis have been subjected to constant Israeli attacks, forcing civilians to seek refuge in distant areas.
Mira la gente.
Look at the people, how they are now. It is a very painful scene. Where is the Arab conscience? Where is the world? They are looking at what is happening to us, that there is no treatment and no life. They look at the children and the elderly. They just look at them while they are being displaced.
We were sitting in our house. Then the Israeli army called us to evacuate the area and leave. We don't know what happened. We have no money, no food, no nothing. Where are they going? We and our children will sit in the street while the shelling is over our heads.
In our news, in the United States, activists from Jewish Voice for Peace gathered at Capitol Hill calling for an end to arms transfers to Israel ahead of Netanyahu's speech. Hundreds of demonstrators suddenly flooded the rotunda of a congressional office building, staging an unexpected protest against Israel's military actions in Gaza. Capitol Police swiftly designated the area off limits and detained numerous protesters who remain. This demonstration occurred on the eve of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's scheduled address to Congress, an invitation extended by leading lawmakers from both major political parties. Netanyahu's administration has presided over a 9-month genocide in Gaza. In this context, U.S. lawmakers said that they will boycott Benjamin Netanyahu's speech in Congress. Several Democrat congressmen announced that they will not attend the legislative chamber in the rejection of the presence of the head of the Israeli government. In this regard, Senator Bernie Sanders stated that Netanyahu is a war criminal and that his far-right government should not receive 1% more from the U.S. taxpayers to continue the inhuman destruction of Gaza. Also, Representative Rashida Tlaib and Senators Patty Murray, Tim Kaine, Chris Van Hollen, among others, will take part in the boycott.
President Biden has prioritized the safe return of all hostages. Prime Minister Netanyahu has not. He continues to put his own political survival first, above the interests of the people of Israel and the U.S. citizens. Mr. President, I renew my call for an immediate ceasefire and the return of all hostages.
Let's now learn about Tibetan opera in China, an art that survived thanks to the heir Tenzin Gyatso, and whose performance combined singing, acting, dance, and literature.
With a history of more than 600 years, and rooted in the teachings of Buddhism, the Tibetan opera has maintained its original essence through samples of chants and narrations, which relate the victory of good and the condemnation of evil. One of the most representative implements of the attire is the traditional mask, with different shapes and colors, but mainly with dark blue representing bravery and perseverance, white for the pacification of misfortune, yellow for the increase of merit, and black for the subjugation of evil.
El amarillo por el aumento del mérito y el negro por la subyugación del mal.
I feel that Tibetan opera has been with me for as long as I can remember. Whenever I heard the sound of Tibetan opera, I was very excited and very eager to get there and see it, and I felt a special kind of joy every time I saw it.
The opera is performed in public squares, theaters, and temples, where the central nucleus of the piece is a theatrical work recited by a single narrator and performed by several actors accompanied by groups of singers, dancers, and acrobats, thus combining acrobatics with religious rites. In 2009, this cultural expression of Western China was declared an intangible cultural heritage of humanity by UNESCO.
The protection and preservation of opera is not just for heirs like us. I think it is a crucial part of heritage protection and preservation when it attracts more and more people's attention. I hope the public will pay more attention to Tibetan opera and the traditional culture of our Chinese nation, which I think is the most important thing.
Tibetan opera has gained momentum in recent years thanks to efforts to preserve this cultural heritage, to the point where it has attracted the attention of more young people, and coupled with the many courses offered at the region's folk art hall, more people have shown interest in learning this art.
With this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.